Corinne Hawthorne stepped into the Stone Mesa auction yard, with her ledger pressed against her ribs and her heart hammering against bone. The cattle pens stank of manure and dust, and the sun was too bright, and she needed to buy 3 breeding bulls before her brother gambled away the last of their credit. She scanned the crowd of ranchers and buyers, calculating who she could outbid, who would let her defer payment. Then, she saw him. Cole Sloan. 7 years vanished like smoke. He stood near the auctioneer's platform, taller than she remembered, weathered by sun and distance, his coat dusty from the trail. His eyes found hers across 30 feet of churned dirt, and the recognition hit him like a bullet. He went still. She went cold. The auctioneer called the first lot, but Corinne heard nothing except the roar of blood in her ears. Cole started toward her, slow and deliberate, and she knew with bone-deep certainty that the secret she had buried 7 years ago had just walked back into her life. She turned and headed for the far side of the corral, heels catching in the dirt. He followed. She could feel his gaze on her back, could sense the questions piling up behind his silence. When she reached the fence rail, she stopped and gripped the wood hard enough to splinter. He stopped 3 paces behind her. His voice came low and rough. Corinne. She closed her eyes. 7 years, and her name in his mouth still felt like a brand. She turned to face him, lifting her chin. Mr. Sloan. The formality hung between them like a wall. He took off his hat, and the sunlight caught the silver threads at his temples. She had loved those eyes once, brown and steady, full of promises he never kept. Now they searched her face with something like shock. I didn't know you were still in Stone Mesa. She gave him a smile sharp as glass. Where else would I be? He flinched. She hated that it gave her satisfaction. The auctioneer called the second lot. Corinne forced herself to turn back toward the pens, to pretend she cared about cattle weight and bloodlines. Cole moved up beside her, close enough that she could smell trail dust and leather, and something darker, like regret. I'm here to buy stock for the northern ranches, he said quietly. I've been working out of Cheyenne. She nodded once, keeping her gaze fixed on the bulls. Good for you. He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, we need to talk. Her laugh came out brittle. No, we really don't. His hand moved as if to touch her arm, then dropped. Corinne, what we started, it never. He stopped, searching for words. It never finished, she said flatly. No, it didn't. And that's how it stays. She walked away before he could answer, her spine rigid, her pulse wild. The bidding opened at $40. Corinne raised her hand at $50. A rancher from the East Valley went to $60. She pushed to $70, her stomach clenching. She had $80 in her reticule, and a prayer that her father's name still carried weight. The rancher bid $75. She opened her mouth to go to $80 when Cole's voice cut through the noise. $100. The crowd went quiet. Corinne's head snapped toward him. He stood with his arms crossed, face unreadable, bidding like he had money to burn. The auctioneer grinned. 100. Do I hear 110? Corinne's hands shook. She could not match that. She could not even come close. Cole met her gaze across the yard, and something passed between them. Some message she could not decode. The auctioneer called it. Sold to Mr. Sloan for $100. Corinne turned and walked straight out of the auction yard. Her vision blurred at the edges. She had come here with one job: to secure breeding stock so Bluebird Ranch could survive another season. And Cole Sloan had outbid her like she was nothing. Like the past 7 years were nothing. She made it to the edge of the lot before his voice called after her. "Corinne, wait." She did not wait. She kept walking toward her wagon, parked in the shade of a cottonwood. He caught up to her anyway, boots thudding in the dirt. "I bought those bulls for you," he said. She stopped, turned, stared at him. "What?" He shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable for the first time. "I'm buying for a client who needs 12 head. I can spare 3 for Bluebird." Her breath caught. "Why would you do that?" His jaw tightened. "Because you needed them. Because I know what your brother's been doing to the ranch. Because I owe you." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "You don't owe me anything, Cole. You made that clear when you left." He stepped closer, and she saw the flash of anger in his eyes. "I left because you told me to." Her heart slammed against her ribs. "I told you to leave because you were 2 hours late to the church and reeked of whiskey." He exhaled hard, dragging a hand through his hair. "I was late because your brother locked me in the back room of the saloon. I was drinking because he kept pouring. And by the time I got free, you were gone." She felt the ground tilt under her feet. "Liar." He shook his head slowly. "Ask him yourself. But you won't, because you already know it's true." She wanted to hit him. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to collapse right there in the dirt. Instead, she turned away, blinking hard. "Those bulls. Can I pay you back over the season?" "Yes," he said quietly. "And I'll deliver them myself tomorrow." She climbed into her wagon without another word and drove out of town with her hands shaking on the reins. The road back to Bluebird Ranch stretched long and dusty under the afternoon sun. She tried to focus on the ruts in the road, the sway of the wagon, the rhythm of the horse's hooves. But all she could see was Cole's face, the way his voice had cracked when he said, "Your brother locked me in." She had spent 7 years hating him for abandoning her at the altar. 7 years building a life alone, running the ranch her father left her, enduring the whispers and the pity and the slow rot of her reputation. And if Cole was telling the truth, if Ethan had sabotaged the wedding, then she had wasted 7 years hating the wrong man. Her brother had always resented her inheritance. Their father had left Bluebird to Corinne because Ethan drank and gambled and could not be trusted. But sabotage? She thought of the debts piling up. The way Ethan came home every week with empty pockets and excuses. She thought of the way he had smiled the day after the wedding fell apart. The memory made her sick. By the time she reached Bluebird, the sun was sinking low, painting the hills in shades of copper and gold. The ranch house stood at the end of a long dirt drive, a sturdy 2-story structure with a wide porch and a sagging roof that needed repair. The barn sat to the left, the corral to the right, and beyond that, the pastures rolled out toward the horizon, dotted with cattle that looked thinner every year. She parked the wagon and climbed down, her legs stiff, her mind still spinning. Ethan stood on the porch, leaning against a post, a bottle dangling from one hand. He grinned when he saw her. "How'd the auction go, sister?" She walked past him without answering and went inside. He followed, boots heavy on the floorboards. "You buy those bulls?" She set her reticule on the kitchen table and turned to face him. No, I didn't. His grin faded. What do you mean you didn't? Someone outbid me. His eyes narrowed. Who? She watched his face carefully. Cole Sloan. Ethan went very still. Then he laughed. Too loud. Too sharp. Cole Sloan? That drifter's back in town? She kept her voice level. He's a cattle buyer now. Works out of Cheyenne. He bought 3 bulls, and he's delivering them here tomorrow. Ethan's face darkened. Like hell he is. You tell him we don't need his charity. It's not charity. I'm paying him back over the season. Her brother took a step closer, and she smelled whiskey on his breath. You're not bringing him onto this ranch. She crossed her arms. This is my ranch, Ethan. Not yours. He slammed the bottle down on the table hard enough to crack the wood. Your ranch? Father left it to you because he thought I wasn't good enough. He thought I'd ruin it. She met his glare without flinching. And he was right. You've done nothing but bleed this place dry since he died. Ethan's lip curled. Maybe if you'd married when you had the chance, we'd have a man around here to run things properly. She felt the words like a slap. But before she could answer, he stormed out, the door slamming behind him. Cole arrived at dawn with the bulls loaded onto a reinforced wagon and a hired hand riding behind. Corinne met him in the yard, her hair still damp from washing, her dress buttoned tight against the morning chill. He climbed down from the wagon and nodded to her, his face unreadable. Morning, she nodded back. Morning. The hired hand began unloading the bulls into the corral while Cole unhitched the team. Corinne stood with her arms crossed, watching the animals move. Solid and healthy, worth every dollar he'd spent. She cleared her throat. Thank you for this. He glanced at her. You already said that yesterday. I mean it today, too. He smiled faintly, and for a moment, she saw the boy she'd loved, the one who used to make her laugh, who promised her a future. Then the moment passed, and he was a stranger again. Where do you want these bulls pastured? She pointed toward the eastern field. Out past the creek. I'll ride with you to show you. They saddled horses in silence. Corinne's mare was old, but steady, and Cole's gelding looked like it had seen 1,000 miles. They rode side by side across the ranch, the morning sun warm on their backs, the grass still wet with dew. The silence between them felt heavy, full of things neither knew how to say. Finally, Cole spoke. Your brother's been losing money at the poker tables in town. Word is, he owes close to $200. She kept her eyes on the horizon. I know. He's going to drag this place under if you don't stop him. She shot him a sharp look. What do you suggest I do? Tie him up? He's my brother. Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he said, He's the reason you lost everything 7 years ago. She pulled her horse to a stop. He stopped beside her. She turned to face him, her heart pounding. Did he really lock you in that saloon? Cole met her gaze, steady and unflinching. Yes. And he told me you'd changed your mind, that you didn't want to marry a saddle tramp with no prospects. She felt something crack inside her chest. I waited 2 hours in that church. My father was there. Half the town was there. I looked like a fool. I know, Cole said quietly. And I'm sorry. But I tried to get to you. I tried. She turned her face away, blinking hard. Why didn't you come find me after? Why didn't you explain? He exhaled slowly. Because by the time I got out, you'd already left. And your father told me if I ever came near you again, he'd shoot me. She stared at him. My father said that? Cole nodded. He thought I'd humiliated you on purpose. Thought I was drunk and reckless. And maybe I was reckless, but I wasn't lying. I wanted to marry you, Corinne. I wanted it more than anything. She felt tears sting her eyes and hated herself for it. Then why did you leave Stone Mesa? He looked away, toward the distant hills. Because staying here and watching you hate me was worse than leaving. So I went north, found work, built something. And I told myself I'd come back when I had enough money to prove I wasn't worthless. She wiped her eyes roughly. You don't have to prove anything to me. He looked back at her, and his voice was raw. Don't I? They rode the rest of the way in silence. When they reached the eastern pasture, Cole helped her move the bulls through the gate, then checked the fence line for breaks. He worked with the easy competence of a man who had spent his life around cattle, and Corinne found herself watching him, remembering the way his hands used to feel on her waist, the way he used to kiss her under the cottonwood by the creek. She shook the thought away. That was a lifetime ago. When the work was done, they rode back toward the house. Halfway there, they saw a rider coming fast from the direction of town. Cole shaded his eyes. Who's that? Corinne squinted. I don't know. The rider pulled up hard, dust swirling. It was a boy from the Mercantile, barely 16, his face flushed. Miss Hawthorne, he gasped. You need to get back to town. There's men asking about you. What kind of men? Corinne asked sharply. The boy glanced at Cole nervously, the kind with guns and wanted posters. They're saying they're looking for someone who used to live here. Someone named Sloan. Cole's face went hard. What did they look like? The boy swallowed. 3 of them. One's tall, gray beard, scar on his cheek. The others are younger. They're at the saloon, asking questions. Cole cursed under his breath. Corinne turned to him. Who are they? Bounty hunters, he said flatly. They've been tracking me for 2 years. Her stomach dropped. Why? He met her eyes, and she saw something dark and bitter there. Because I killed a man in Cheyenne. The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Corinne felt the ground shift under her again. You killed someone? Cole's voice was tight. He was beating a woman to death in an alley. I pulled him off her, and he went for his gun. I was faster. The woman lived. He didn't. And his brother's been hunting me ever since. Corinne's mind raced. So this isn't about justice. It's about revenge. Cole nodded. And if they find me here, they'll burn your ranch to flush me out. You need to leave. Now. He turned his horse toward the road, but Corinne spurred her mare forward and grabbed his reins. Wait. He looked at her, startled. You can't just run. They'll follow you. They'll find you eventually. I've been running for 2 years, he said quietly. I'm good at it. She shook her head. No. We fight. His eyes widened. Corinne, this isn't your fight. You saved a woman's life, and now you're being hunted for it. That makes it my fight. He stared at her, something shifting in his expression. Why would you help me? After everything? She held his gaze, her heart pounding. Because you came back. Because you told the truth. Because I'm tired of running from the past. He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, if we do this, it has to be smart. We can't face 3 armed men head on. She nodded. Then we make them come to us. On our terms. He smiled faintly, and it was the first real smile she'd seen from him in 7 years. You always were stubborn. She smiled back, sharp and fierce, and you always were reckless. Let's use that. They sent the boy back to town with instructions to tell the bounty hunters that Cole Sloan was holed up at Bluebird Ranch and would surrender at sundown. Then, they rode hard for the ranch, Corinne's mind spinning with plans. When they reached the house, Ethan was on the porch again, watching them approach with narrowed eyes. What's going on? Corinne dismounted and handed him the reins. We have visitors coming, the kind with guns. You need to leave. Ethan straightened. I'm not leaving. This is my home too. She turned on him, her voice cold. You lost the right to call this home when you sabotaged my wedding and lied about it for 7 years. His face went white. Cole stepped up beside her, his voice calm but edged with steel. She knows, Ethan. She knows what you did. Ethan's hand moved toward his belt, but Cole was faster, his revolver out and leveled before Ethan's fingers touched iron. Don't, Cole said quietly. Ethan froze. Corinne stepped between them. Ethan, leave, now. Or I swear, I'll let him shoot you. Her brother stared at her, something like shock in his eyes. Then he turned and walked toward the barn without a word. Corinne and Cole worked fast. They barricaded the windows, loaded rifles, set lanterns at strategic points around the yard. Corinne moved through the house with grim efficiency, her hands steady, her mind clear. She had spent 7 years running this ranch alone, 7 years fighting drought and debt and her brother's recklessness. She was not about to lose it now. Cole watched her from across the room, and when their eyes met, he said, You don't have to do this. She set down the rifle she was loading and crossed to him. Yes, I do. He reached out and touched her cheek, his fingers rough and warm. I never stopped thinking about you. Her breath caught. I never stopped hating you. Until yesterday. He smiled, sad and crooked. Is that progress? She leaned into his touch, just for a moment. Ask me again when this is over. He nodded. Deal. The sun sank low, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire. Corinne stood at the window, watching the road. Cole stood behind her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. 3 riders appeared on the horizon, moving slow and deliberate. Here they come, she said quietly. Cole checked his revolver. Remember the plan? She nodded. I remember. The riders stopped at the edge of the yard, silhouetted against the dying light. The tall one with the gray beard called out. Cole Sloan, we know you're in there. Come out and we'll make this quick. Cole stepped onto the porch, hands loose at his sides. Corinne stayed inside, rifle trained through the window. I'm here, Cole said. What do you want? The bearded man spat into the dirt. Justice. Cole's voice was steady. Your brother drew on me first. I have witnesses. The man laughed, cold and humorless. I don't care about witnesses. I care about blood. He reached for his gun. Corinne fired first. The shot cracked through the evening air and kicked up dirt 2 feet in front of the bearded man's horse. The animal reared, and the rider fought for control. "That's a warning," Corinne called from the window. "The next one's not." The bearded man steadied his mount, eyes blazing. "You're protecting a murderer, lady." Cole's voice cut through the tension. "I'm not a murderer. And you know it. You just want someone to blame because your brother was a coward and a brute." The bearded man's face twisted with rage. He went for his gun again. Cole drew faster, his shot clean and precise, hitting the man's shoulder. The man screamed and dropped his weapon. The other two riders hesitated, hands hovering near their guns. Corinne fired again, this time taking the hat off the nearest rider. The man yelped and yanked his horse around. The third rider was already retreating. The bearded man clutched his shoulder, blood seeping through his fingers. He looked at Cole with pure hatred. "This isn't over." Cole's voice was cold. "Yes, it is. Get off my land." The three men turned and rode back toward town. The bearded man slumped in his saddle. Corinne lowered her rifle, her hands shaking now that the danger had passed. Cole stepped back inside, holstering his gun. He crossed to her and took the rifle gently, setting it aside. Then he pulled her into his arms. She went stiff for a moment, then collapsed against him, her face pressed to his chest, her breath coming in short gasps. "You're all right," he murmured. "We're all right." She pulled back and looked up at him, her eyes bright. "You could have died. So could you." She laughed, shaky and breathless. "I can't believe I just shot at 3 men." He smiled. "You have good aim." She hit his chest lightly. "This isn't funny." He caught her hand and held it. "I know. But we're alive. And they're gone." She searched his face. "Are they really gone? Or will they come back?" He was quiet for a moment. "They'll tell the law I shot first. I'll have to leave Stone Mesa. Maybe leave the territory." Her heart clenched. "No." He touched her cheek. "Corinne, I can't stay here and put you in danger." She gripped his shirt. "Then I'll come with you." He stared at her. "What?" She lifted her chin. "I'll come with you. We'll sell the ranch, pay off the debts, and leave. Together." He shook his head slowly. "You love this place. You fought for it. I can't ask you to give it up." She stepped closer, her voice fierce. "You're not asking. I'm choosing. 7 years ago I lost you because I believed a lie. I'm not losing you again." His eyes searched hers. "What about your brother?" She looked away. "Ethan made his choices. I'm making mine." Cole cupped her face in both hands. "Are you sure?" She met his gaze, steady and certain. "I've never been more sure of anything." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and it felt like coming home after a long exile. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "We'll need a plan," she smiled. "We'll figure it out. Together." They sat at the kitchen table and made plans by lamplight. Corinne would sell the cattle and equipment, settle the debts, and keep enough for travel. Cole would arrange safe passage north, where his name was not yet known. They would marry quietly, in a town where no one asked questions, and start fresh. It was not the life she had imagined, but it was a life with him, and that was enough. As they talked, she found herself watching his hands, the way they moved when he spoke, the way his eyes softened when he looked at her. She had forgotten how much she loved his voice, low and steady, like a promise kept. When the plans were made, he reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For all of it." She squeezed his fingers. "I'm sorry too, for not believing you, for letting him poison everything." He shook his head. "You didn't know." She met his eyes. "But I should have trusted you." He smiled faintly. "We were young. We made mistakes." She smiled back. "We're not young anymore." "No," he agreed. "But maybe that's better. Maybe now we know what we're fighting for." They spent the night preparing. Corinne packed what she could carry, leaving behind furniture and memories. Cole rode into town under cover of darkness to arrange the sale and to pay off Ethan's debts, so her brother would not be hounded after they left. When he returned near dawn, he found her standing on the porch, watching the stars fade. He climbed the steps and stood beside her. "It's done," he said. "The ranch will sell by the end of the week. The buyer's paying fair price." She nodded, her throat tight. "Did you see Ethan?" He hesitated. "Yes." "And?" Cole sighed. "He's angry, but he knows he brought this on himself." She closed her eyes. "He's still my brother." "I know," Cole said gently. "And you're still giving him a way out. That's more than he deserves." She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. They stood there in the pre-dawn quiet, watching the sky turn from black to gray to gold. When the sun finally broke the horizon, Corinne turned to him. "Are we really doing this?" He kissed the top of her head. "We are." She took a deep breath. "Then let's go." They left Bluebird Ranch at noon, the wagon loaded with their belongings, 2 horses tied behind. Corinne looked back once as they crossed the creek, her chest tight with grief and relief tangled together. The ranch looked smaller from a distance, fragile and worn, and she wondered if it had always been that way, or if she had just been too close to see it. Cole glanced at her. "Regrets?" She shook her head. "No. Just goodbyes." He nodded and kept the horses moving. They traveled north, away from Stone Mesa, away from the past. The road was long and dusty, and the sun was hot, but Corinne felt lighter than she had in years. That night, they camped under the stars, and Cole built a fire while she unpacked their bedrolls. They ate beans and hardtack and drank coffee that tasted like mud, and it was the best meal she could remember. After, they sat close to the fire, shoulders touching, watching the flames dance. Cole broke the silence. "I never thought I'd get a second chance with you." She looked at him. "I never thought I'd want one. But here we are." He smiled. "Here we are." They reached a small town called Ridgeline 3 days later. It was not much, just a main street, a hotel, a church, and a mercantile. But it was far enough from Stone Mesa that no one would ask questions. They married in the church at sunset, with a traveling preacher and 2 witnesses pulled from the street. Corinne wore the same green dress she had worn the day of the auction, and Cole wore his cleanest shirt. There were no flowers, no guests, no celebration. Just 2 people who had lost each other and found their way back, standing in a dusty church and promising forever. When the preacher pronounced them married, Cole kissed her, and she felt 7 years of grief and anger and loneliness fall away. They walked out of the church, hand in hand, into the golden evening light, and Corinne thought, this is what starting over looks like. They took a room at the hotel, small and plain, with a single window overlooking the street. That night, they lay together in the narrow bed, tangled in each other, whispering the things they had not been able to say for 7 years. Cole told her about the years alone, the work and the waiting, and the hope that someday she might forgive him. Corinne told him about the ranch, the loneliness, the weight of carrying everything alone. They cried a little. They laughed a little. And when words were not enough, they held each other in the dark and let the silence speak. The next morning, they woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of wagons rattling past. Cole propped himself on one elbow and looked down at her. "Good morning, Mrs. Sloane." She smiled, slow and bright. "Good morning, Mr. Sloane." He kissed her forehead. "Ready for the rest of our lives?" She pulled him closer. "Absolutely." They spent a week in Ridgeline, resting and planning. Cole found work as a livestock agent for a northern rancher who needed someone to scout breeding stock across the territory. It was good work, steady pay, and it would keep them moving, which suited them both. Corinne wrote letters to old friends, to the lawyer handling the ranch sale, to no one in particular. She was learning how to live without roots, and it was harder than she expected. But every time doubt crept in, she looked at Cole, and the doubt faded. On their last night in Ridgeline, they sat on the hotel porch, watching the stars come out. A rider came into town, dusty and tired, and tied his horse at the rail. He glanced at them, nodded politely, and went inside. Corinne leaned against Cole's shoulder. "Do you think they'll ever stop looking for you?" He was quiet for a moment. "Maybe, maybe not, but we'll be long gone by then." She smiled. "Where to next?" He pulled a folded map from his pocket and spread it on his knee. "There's a ranch up near the Montana border. Owner's looking for a manager. Good land, good water. We could stay a year, maybe 2. Build up some savings." She traced the route with her finger. "Montana. That's far." He looked at her. "Too far?" She shook her head. "No, just far enough." They left Ridgeline at dawn, heading north into country that grew wilder with every mile. The plains gave way to foothills, and the foothills gave way to mountains, sharp and gray against the sky. They crossed rivers and passed through towns that barely had names. At night, they camped under trees that smelled of pine and listened to wolves howl in the distance. Corinne learned to cook over an open fire, to mend harness leather, to read the weather by the clouds. Cole taught her to shoot straight, to track game, to fix a wagon wheel without cursing too much. They grew lean and weathered, and their love grew with them, tested and tempered by the road. One afternoon, they stopped at a creek to water the horses, and Corinne waded in up to her knees, laughing at the cold. Cole watched her from the bank, smiling. "What?" she called. "Nothing," he said. "Just remembering." "Remembering what?" "The first time I saw you. You were wading in the creek behind your father's ranch." She grinned. "You were trespassing." "Still am," he said. She splashed him, and he jumped in after her, and they ended up soaked and breathless and happy in a way that felt new and old at the same time. They reached the Montana ranch in late summer, when the grass was tall and gold and the air smelled like sun and dust. The owner, a grizzled man named Calloway, looked them over with shrewd eyes. "You know cattle?" Cole nodded. "I've been working stock since I was 12. Calloway turned to Corinne. "And you?" She met his gaze. "I ran a ranch in New Mexico for 7 years. He grunted. "Good enough. You start tomorrow." They moved into a small cabin on the property. One room with a loft, a stone fireplace, and a view of the mountains. It was not much, but it was theirs, and that made it everything. Corinne scrubbed the floors and hung curtains, while Cole repaired the roof and fixed the corral fence. At night, they fell into bed exhausted and woke tangled together, the morning light cold and bright. The work was hard, but it was honest, and for the first time in years, Corinne felt like she was building something, instead of just holding on. Autumn came, and with it, the first snow. Corinne stood in the yard, watching the flakes fall, feeling the cold bite her cheeks. Cole came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Cold?" "A little." He pulled her closer. "We could go inside." She leaned back against him. "Or we could stay here and watch." They stayed. The snow fell thick and soft, covering the world in white, and Corinne thought about how far they had come, how much they had survived. She thought about the ranch she had lost, the brothers she had left behind, the life she had walked away from, and she thought about the man standing behind her, solid and warm, who had come back when it mattered most. "Do you miss it?" she asked quietly. "Stone Mesa?" "Sometimes," he admitted, "but not as much as I missed you." She turned in his arms and looked up at him. "I'm glad you came back." He kissed her forehead. "So am I." She smiled. "Even with the bounty hunters and the shooting and the running?" "Especially because of that," he said. "It proves we're meant for this. For each other." She kissed him then, slow and sweet, and the snow fell around them like a blessing. Winter was hard. The snow piled high, and the work was relentless. They spent long days feeding cattle, breaking ice on water troughs, repairing fences that buckled under the weight of snow. At night, they huddled by the fire, wrapped in blankets, reading aloud from a battered copy of Shakespeare that Corinne had packed. Cole's voice stumbled over the old words, and she laughed, and he threw a pillow at her, and they ended up wrestling on the floor like children. But there were hard nights too. Nights when the wind howled, and the cabin felt too small, and the past came creeping back. Nights when Corinne woke from dreams of the ranch burning, of Ethan's face twisted with rage, of Cole lying in the dirt with blood on his chest. On those nights, Cole held her and whispered that it was over, that they were safe, that nothing could touch them here. And slowly, she believed him. Spring arrived like a promise kept, the snow melting into rivers, the grass pushing up green and new. Calloway offered them a permanent position, and they accepted. The cabin became a home. Corinne planted a garden, and Cole built a chicken coop, and they fell into a rhythm that felt like peace. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set, Corinne said, "I think I'm happy." Cole looked at her, surprised. "You think?" She laughed. "I know. I'm happy." He took her hand. "Good, because I am too." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you think we'll ever go back? To Stone Mesa?" He was quiet for a moment. "Maybe. Someday." When it's safe. She nodded. I'd like that. I'd like to show you the creek where we used to meet. The cottonwood tree. I'd like to say goodbye properly. He squeezed her hand. We will. I promise. She believed him. Summer came again, and with it, a letter. It arrived on a Tuesday, carried by a rider who was passing through. The envelope was smudged and worn, and the handwriting was unfamiliar. Corinne opened it at the kitchen table while Cole watched. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It read, Miss Hawthorne, or Mrs. Sloane, if the rumors are true. Your brother is dead. Died in a card game gone wrong. Thought you should know. The ranch sold. Money's waiting for you in Stone Mesa if you want it. Signed, Sheriff Drummond. Corinne set the letter down slowly. Her hands were shaking. Cole read it over her shoulder, then pulled her into his arms. I'm sorry. She nodded against his chest. She felt numb, hollow, like someone had scooped out her insides. Ethan was dead. Her brother, her blood, the boy who used to chase her through the fields when they were small, dead because he could not stop gambling, could not stop lying, could not stop destroying everything he touched. She cried then, hard and bitter, and Cole held her through it, saying nothing, just holding on. They traveled back to Stone Mesa in late summer, the wagon loaded with their belongings, the road familiar and strange at once. The town looked smaller, shabbier, like time had not been kind. They stopped at the sheriff's office, and Drummond handed Corinne a bank draft for the ranch sale, along with Ethan's few belongings. A watch, a deck of cards, a photograph of their parents. She took them without a word. They buried Ethan in the cemetery on the hill, next to their mother and father. There was no service, no mourners, just Corinne and Cole, and the wind and the silence. Corinne stood at the grave for a long time, her face blank, her heart full of things she could not name. Finally, she said, I forgive you. The words felt small and insufficient, but they were all she had. Cole took her hand. Ready? She nodded. Let's go home. They walked back to the wagon, leaving the past buried in the dry earth. They spent one night in Stone Mesa, at the hotel where they had never stayed together. The room was small and musty, and the bed creaked, but it did not matter. They held each other in the dark and talked about the future. Montana, Cole said. Back to the ranch. Back to the mountains. Corinne nodded. Back home. He kissed her temple. We could buy our own place. Someday. When we're ready. She smiled. I'd like that. A place that's ours. No secrets. No running. Just us. He pulled her closer. Just us. They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time since the letter arrived, Corinne felt at peace. The next morning, they left Stone Mesa for the last time, riding north into the wide open country, into the life they were building together. The sun was bright, the sky was clear, and the road stretched out before them like a promise. Corinne looked at Cole, and he looked at her, and they smiled. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And that was enough. They reached the Montana ranch in early autumn, when the air was crisp and the leaves were turning gold. Calloway greeted them with a nod and a grunt and put them back to work. The cabin felt warm and welcoming, like it had been waiting for them. Corinne unpacked their things, and Cole repaired the shutters that had come loose in the wind. That night, they sat by the fire, eating stew and talking about the herd, the fences, the coming winter. It was ordinary. It was perfect. Later, as they lay in bed, Corinne said, "Do you think we'll ever stop running?" Cole thought for a moment. "I think we already have." She rolled over to face him. "What do you mean?" He touched her cheek. "We're not running anymore. We're just living." She smiled. "I like that." He kissed her. "So do I." They fell asleep with the fire crackling low and the wind singing outside, and Corinne dreamed of mountains and wide open spaces, and a future that felt solid and real. Winter came again, but this time it felt different. They had stores laid in, wood stacked high, the cabin snug and warm. They worked hard, but they also played. They went sledding down the hill behind the cabin, laughing like children. They built a snowman that Cole insisted looked like Callaway, and Corinne agreed. They spent long evenings by the fire, talking and reading and dreaming. And on the coldest nights, they lay tangled together under every blanket they owned, and Cole whispered plans for the future. A place of their own, a herd of cattle. Maybe, someday, children. Corinne listened and smiled and believed. Spring came, and with it, wildflowers. Corinne picked armfuls of them and filled the cabin with color. Cole watched her from the doorway, and when she asked what he was smiling at, he said, "Just you. Just this." She crossed to him and kissed him. "I love you." He kissed her back. "I love you too." And it was the simplest, truest thing either of them had ever said. Summer arrived with heat and long days. They worked from dawn to dusk, moving cattle, repairing fences, tending the garden. One afternoon, Cole came in from the fields, dusty and tired, and found Corinne sitting at the table, staring at a piece of paper. "What is it?" he asked. She looked up, her eyes wide. "I'm pregnant." He froze. Then he crossed to her, knelt beside her chair, and took her hands. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I'm sure." He pulled her into his arms, and she felt him trembling. A baby. She laughed, breathless. A baby. He pulled back and looked at her, his eyes bright. "Are you happy?" She cupped his face. "I'm terrified. But yes, I'm happy." He kissed her, fierce and tender. "We can do this." She nodded. "I know. Together. Always together." The months that followed were full of preparation. Cole built a cradle from pine wood, sanding it smooth and carving small flowers into the headboard. Corinne sewed blankets and tiny clothes, her hands slow and careful. They talked about names, about the future, about what kind of parents they wanted to be. And when the fear crept in, when Corinne woke in the night with her heart racing, Cole was there, holding her, reminding her that they had survived worse, that they could survive anything. The baby came in late winter, during a snowstorm that howled around the cabin. Corinne labored for hours, Cole beside her, holding her hand, whispering encouragement. When the baby finally arrived, a tiny girl with dark hair and fierce lungs, Corinne wept with relief and joy. Cole held his daughter for the first time, and his hands shook. "She's perfect," he whispered. Corinne smiled. "What should we name her?" He looked at her. What about Grace? Corinne nodded. Grace. I like that. He kissed the baby's forehead. Welcome to the world, Grace Sloane. The years that followed were not easy, but they were good. Grace grew into a bright, curious child who loved the mountains and the horses and the wide open sky. Cole taught her to ride, and Corinne taught her to read. They bought their own land eventually, a small parcel near the river, and built a house with their own hands. It was not much, but it was theirs, and it was enough. On summer evenings, they sat on the porch, watching Grace chase fireflies, and Cole would take Corinne's hand and say, "We did it." She would squeeze back and say, "We did." And sometimes, late at night, when the house was quiet and the stars were bright, Corinne would think about the girl she used to be, the one who waited in a church and felt her heart break. She would think about the years of anger and loneliness, the mistakes and the grief. And then she would look at the man sleeping beside her, at the daughter dreaming in the next room, at the life they had built from ashes and second chances. And she would whisper into the dark, "Thank you for coming back, for choosing me, for this." And in the morning, the sun would rise again, and the world would be new, and they would face it together. Cole squeezed her hand on the porch, and she leaned her head against his shoulder. Grace's laughter rang out across the yard, chasing the last light of day. The mountains stood dark against the sky, solid and eternal. Somewhere far away, Stone Mesa carried on without them, and the past stayed buried where it belonged. Here, in this moment, there was only the three of them, and the land they had claimed, and the love they had fought for. Corinne closed her eyes and breathed in the scent of pine and river water and home. This was what happiness looked like. Not perfect, not easy, but real. Earned. Theirs. Cole pressed a kiss to her hair. "What are you thinking?" she asked. He smiled. "That I would do it all again. Every hard mile, every mistake, every fight. Just to end up here, with you." She turned her face up to his. "Me too." He kissed her then, slow and sure, and Grace called out from the yard, asking if she could stay up to see the stars. They pulled apart, laughing. "Yes," Corinne called back. "You can stay up. Come here, and we will watch them together." The little girl ran to them, her face bright with joy, and they pulled her between them, wrapping her in warmth and love. The stars came out, one by one, filling the sky with light. And beneath them, the Sloane family sat together, whole and safe, and home at last.